Hello everybody from Pasquale Madonna. Welcome on my YouTube channel. Today we will talk about buying Italian property. We will see what are the steps to buying a property in Italy. Okay, but before we go forward, please subscribe to my channel so you don't miss the next videos. Buying a property in Italy is similar to buying a property in the UK or the United States. There is a complete procedure to follow. Generally, there are 5 steps to follow before you become the owner. Anyway, let's see step by step how is it. Step number 1, formalizing an offer. The first step is formalizing the offer to the vendor through the real estate agent as an intermediary. The offer is then placed in a written way in Italian and in English, and you will normally have to pay a deposit on the property. To be serious about your intention, it's better to send an offer with a little bit money to the vendor. Generally, we are talking about 10,000 or 20,000 euros. If the offer is accepted, the deposit will be paid in advance of the rest of the money. That's called Caparra Confirmatoria. This transaction, called Caparra Confirmatoria, is legally binding. Step number 2, signing a preliminary act. Once the seller accepts the offer, the parties have a binding contract, which is then formalized with the execution of the preliminary act, normally from 1 to 3 months after the offer, a formal agreement according to which the parties undertake to buy and sell the property and agree on the terms and conditions of the sale. This is the most important step during the process. It will contain the details of the sale, including the purchase price. It will also contain a full description of the property with all related information, such as cadastral details and the planning permissions obtained. On signing the Compromesso at this stage, you have to pay the commission fee, Provvigione, to the real estate agent. This is the first contract that the seller and the buyer must sign. Sometimes, however, the preliminary contract, called also Compromesso in Italian, is preceded by a purchase proposal, proposta d'acquisto. With the Compromesso, the party agrees to sell or buy. The total price of the property is set, as well as the terms of payment, the actual timing of the sale, and the amount of the advance payment, down payment, deposit. Then is the paid at the moment to the vendor. This preliminary agreement, even if it's concluded privately, gives rise to commitments that are legally enforceable. If after payment of the deposit the buyer decides not to buy the property, the seller may retain the deposit. But if the seller decides not to sell, the buyer is entitled to receive back an amount equal to double the deposit paid. In case of insolvency of the seller, for example, registration of the preliminary contract allows for recovery of all the amounts paid. This suggested approach offers the best protection for the buyer. There are no obligatory or predetermined tariffs. The fees is therefore left up to the free negotiation between the buyer and the notary. The notary is obligated to provide, upon request, a written estimate with a detailed description of his fees and the taxes payable. The buyer must pay his commission. As an indication only, the fees charged for the purchase of a property commonly 3%. Step number 3, choosing a notary. Buying or selling a property, home, office, shop, studio, land or other, is one of the most significant moments in the life of a person, whether it is an investment or especially if the property is intended as the family home. In order to protect citizens, whether Italian or foreigner, the Italian state requires that the contract be drawn up by an impartial public official who is a specialist in this area, the notary. By law, the notary acts as the third party who is independent of both seller and buyer, ensuring that the conveyance of the property complies with all legal requirements in accordance with the common interests of the parties and with particular attention to the purchaser. For this reason, it is recommended that the purchaser, almost always the weaker party in the transaction, contact his own notary from the start of the negotiations, before signing a proposal to purchase or preliminary contract, since these already represent a binding commitment. In this way, every aspect of the transactions to be entered into can be considered together with the notary. So don't hesitate to consult your legal advisor. The choice of notary is absolutely free. The choice may not be imposed by the real estate agents or the bank providing to the mortgage or by the seller, and it's up to the purchaser. The choice of notary done should be guided by the confidence the client has in him, the amount of time he is willing to spend, and the advice given to ensure a safe purchase. It is extremely important to check that everything is in order before signing any binding document. The parties have the right to consult the notary personally and ask him for all these clarifications and explanations that may be useful for understanding better the consequences and the legal effects of the deed. There are numerous activities carried out by the notary for the preparation of documentation necessary for setting up the transaction. The notary first investigates the intentions of the parties so as to identify the type of deed most suitable for achieving the purpose desired by the client within the confines of the law. In any case, the notary will ensure that the seller really owns the property and has the right to sell it. The notary will identify the parties involved in the transaction and their right to act by verifying the matrimonial property regime applicable between vendors. The notary will check if a property is mortgaged. By law, the notary must be sure that there are no previous mortgages, liens or foreclosures recorded at the local offices. The notary must ensure also that the property in question is not subject to specific constraints or covenants regarding assets classified as of historic, artistic or archaeological value. The notary will have a look at if the previous owner has paid all services charges. The notary must ensure that the cadastral plan exists and must bring into the attention of the parties. The seller must declare and guarantee correspondence between the cadastral plan and the actual state of the property. The notary identifies the taxation applicable to the specific case and proposes into the parties, as well as checking, following indications from the parties, the existence of the requirements for any tax benefits, for example, benefits for the purchase of a first home or a tax credit or exemption in the case of transfers pursuant to separation or divorce proceedings. The notary has specific training in tax matters and is able to suggest solutions resulting in legitimate tax savings. The notary is obligated to collect from the purchaser the funds needed for the payments of taxes and duties. Upon registration of the deed, this will be paid over the taxation authorities. Step number 4. Signing the final act in front of a notary. The transfer of the property takes place with the execution of a deed of sale in front of a notary. The notary, NOTAIO, is only professional entitled to transfer legal title to property in Italy. Although the notary is selected and paid by the buyer, he is an independent public officer. It is a very important stage, and it is necessary for you to understand that the details of the contract. That is the reason why it's mandatory to appoint an official translator or an English spoken. A bank account is recommended, but not mandatory to make the purchase payment at the completion. Step number 5. Formalities. Once the purchase has been completed in the notary office, the foreign buyer will mainly be interested in obtaining a certified copy of the purchase deed as duly launched with the authorities by the Italian notary appointed. A copy of the purchase deed, ROGITO, is usually available for collection within 2-3 months from the date of completion. Finally, it will be necessary to arrange for new contracts, volturazione delle utenze, with the main utilities, power, water, gas, telephone, etc. Conclusions. At this point, I believe it's very clear how to buy a property in Italy. European citizens can buy real estate property in Italy without any restrictions. It is perfectly legal for American people and United Kingdom people. Well, if you like this video, don't forget to share and subscribe. If you are looking for more info, check my website www.pasqualemadonna.com. Bye bye, see you soon.